So I get this question a lot of, what's my purpose? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's your purpose in life? Like, what are you meant to do? Are you meant to be a business owner? Are you meant to travel the world? Are you meant to... You know, my only purpose in life is to be able to reintroduce myself to the most beautiful version of all that I am and that I've always been. That is really like my only purpose in this life. Everything else that comes in that package will reveal itself over time. And yeah, that's been like that's my answer, you know, to reintroduce myself to the beauty of all that I am. That is my purpose. And, you know, when you get into troubled family dynamics, you know, you often try to steer in different directions instead of moving towards it. And you don't have to move towards it to where you have to have a relationship with the people in it, but you have to move towards the memories that you're storing that make you feel a certain type of way, right? Because this journey is your only journey that you have to focus on. You don't have to focus on anybody else. So when you move towards those dynamics that you've locked in here through memory, you get to feel through these things, and you get to, you know, see them by being the observer now, and not so much the victim in, you know, the space that you're currently in. And when you're able to do that, you feel a lot lighter. You know, you feel a lot lighter. You're able to be directed into spaces that you never knew that you could be in. You begin to cherish love relationships differently because you're not living your mother or your father's identity anymore that might come from abuse or lack of self-worth, you know. And this is where the breaking of the generational curses come from, you know, and because most of us are not living our true selves. We're living through a programmed or an identity that was placed upon us through our family members, that we revered and that we put on the throne and a pedestal, and, you know, had ourselves thinking that, you know, we weren't worthy, and, you know, having us shut down and making us think that our words weren't worthy of a conversation, you know. And the more that you're able to tone down the loudness of your family dynamics, then the smoke, clear it out, baby, clear that shit out. The more that you're able to tone down the chaos and the noise from the family dynamics, the more you're able to hear your heartbeat again, and your voice matters. And, you know, you begin to nourish yourself from the inside instead of nourishing yourself from things that are external, that are very fleeting and flighting, it's all the same shit. So yeah, you know, and I don't think that this really gets spoken about much. I think it's a very hush-hush situation because family members don't want to hear about your journey and your path and what you've been through, because they too were a part of the illusion of thinking that everything was great. And that's because your parents ended up portraying that as a reality. So when you really speak from the depths of yourself, your family members or friends that knew you from that state of where you were at aren't going to be able to recognize and hear what you're saying, because they're still stuck on that one identity that you came in as, you know. But that's why they say every single day I'm changing. You don't know me anymore. You don't know who I am anymore. I am not the same person. I'm just not, you know. And you have boundaries now, and you have a voice now, and you're able to speak your truth now, and you're able to move with more fluidity because you've detached yourself from the invisible shackles that have caused these generational gaps and curses that have carried on through the timeline and carried on through the umbilical cord and carried on through the DNA, you know. And at some point somebody has to burn that shit down. So, you know, for me, that's why I said opening up this business, not for myself, but for my children and their children's children, is extremely important to me. And that's my main focus. And not just that, it's also always realizing that even though your children, this is for the single mothers, even though your children You may not have the relationship that you desire to have from them coming from experience. The umbilical cord for them will never be severed, never be severed. There's always going to be a connection that is always present. And so when you think that you have to actually be in the presence of your children in order for healing or any of that to, come through, that's not the case. I think with just like anything else in life, if you're big on energy and you're big on creating a reality for yourself that you see, not just through love, not just through money, but having that wholeness and balance with your children, then you have to speak to them in the end as if it has already happened, just like you would with anything else. So we're not going to focus on what they're not doing. We're going to focus on how and what they are doing and the reality that you see for that. And eventually the energy will begin to emit itself, and it'll bring forth everything that you've put out there and the things that you've emitted and that you've shown, because you're living very intentionally, and you have this reverence and this patience for this experience. And know that when you are living from your truth and you are living from integrity, no matter who try to come in and steer in a different direction, they will have to deal with their shit. And granted, let them deal with that, but you have to, remain still, remain in the end result of how you want to see things done, and always know that you are the warrior in this reality. And in order for there to be any change in whatever it is, there has to be change. There is no change without any change, baby. So, I think a lot of us go through stuff like this, and I just love creating these videos. I know my page is basically van life, but there are moments where, we're humans. We've came in this reality, in this time-space reality, to experience certain things, and most of us have, seen distrust and dishonor by those that we love the most, or should have loved the most. And how we get through that is going to be determined and dependent upon your perception, and perspective. I just made that one word. What did I say? I gotta get that. How you perceive it, and not playing the victim in this anymore, but being the warrior who is going to arise, rise and, fight the good fight. And not physically, just in the unknown of things, in the things that can't be seen, because that's where it all truly matters. And so to all the generational curse slayers out there, which is what I'm going to name this, generational curse slayers out there, I wish you the best. Just know that everything that you're currently experiencing in this moment is a memory. And I always like to put these in my videos. Is it something that is happening to you now? No, it's not. The only time that we get triggered by something is because the memory that you hold in your subconscious mind has that familiar moment, or has that familiar space that is allowing you to get triggered by things. And this is where you need to be accountable by your reaction towards it. Because in this present moment, there is nothing happening to us. Everything is just a memory. And what happens is that the mind scans for familiar territory. And if you keep giving it familiar territory, it's going to keep replaying familiar territory, and you're going to keep experiencing familiar territory. So let's do better, even myself, with knowing that we came to conquer and win the ancestral lineage, and be able to move forward into feeding our children and grandchildren a different narrative. All right. And no matter who it is, what it is, where it is that has anything separate to deal with that, then we have to learn to be okay with just. All right. I believe in you, and I believe in me, and we are all worthy. Look at my grays coming in again. They're doing their thing. All right, y'all. Love you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Peace. Let's discuss breaking generational curses. Please forgive the pounding in the back. I'm at my office, as you can see, and they're doing some construction in one of the offices, so I apologize ahead of time. Breaking generational curses and why it's important to choose yourself to be the black sheep, the rebel, what other archetype can you take on? The warrior. We have all of these archetypes, right, that we can take on as far as our energy. And in order for us to cut the cord of transferring lack into our children and children's children and children's children, there is going to have to be one that is going to be able to do this. Now, I used to question myself back in the day, like, well, my boys are grown. How the hell am I going to break generational curses now when they themselves, have been instilled with what I thought was right 20 some years ago? I have 3 boys, 26, 24, and 22. Now, unfortunately, they are going to have to go through things in their life that I instilled in them, which I thought 20 years ago was the right way. And now when I look back, I'm like, none of that shit even makes sense right now. So this is the thing about evolution. What you thought was good for you then may not be good for you now, and what you think is good for you now might not be good for you for your future self. And this is where the being fluid with your life and not being so harsh on where you've been has to be part of the forefront, because if not, you're going to live in anxiety, you're going to live in depression, you're going to live in guilt, you're going to live in lack, you're going to live in all of those things. But this is what evolving is all about. This is what evolution is all about. So back then, I was like, how am I supposed to be the one that's going to break generational curses if I'm choosing not to have any more children? And if I already instilled this into my children and they're already in their 20s, how does anything get broken if they're living a current reality that I programmed them into, right? But I realize it's not just about that. It's not just about that. It's about being able to be who you are in this present moment currently, right? And also being able to create generational wealth in this life, because it's not just the wealth, it's also health, it's also mental clarity, it's also emotional intelligence, it's all of these things, right? These all have to deal with breaking generational curses. And there has to be someone in the family that decides to finally break the mold, right? To finally shatter that bitch to pieces to where it cannot be built back up again off of that reality. And this is where I'm coming in. I just turned 47 yesterday, by the way, January 17th. I didn't make a big fuss about it because I'm not an observer of birthdays and all that type of shit, but I'm in my mid-40s, all right? I'm using that as an example. I'm 47. And when is there finally going to be the energy and the sacrifice to be able to be that person that slays generational curses, right? Down the bloodlines. I'm not a believer in stating that it runs in the family, so this is who I am, because I feel that becomes a victim mentality, because that's not true. Everything is changeable. DNA is actually something that can be formed and changed through right thoughts and actions and setting that example. And so with that, my biggest thing when it came to my family was, yes, abuse, mental, physically, emotional, lack of generational wealth. There's definitely not that there. That was like always on a struggle bus. You have to hustle and grind mentality, and for me now, living in my mid-40s, I'm just like a completely different vibe. I'm more into that rise and align aspect instead of rise and grind, and when you take on that baton, when you've been tossed that invisible baton, but you feel it in your soul that this is meant for you to play this role, you take that as a badge of honor, you know, and you don't sit back and keep complaining or keep speaking about all of this to other people, but yet not doing anything about it. Like, this is what we're used to doing. We're a society where we're good at bitching and complaining, but when it's time to do the work and when it's time to sacrifice our comfort zones, we don't want to do it. And so I refuse to play the victim, and I refuse to, you know, be that for myself, for my children, and also my grandchildren to come, which there's not any yet, thank God. But when there is, you know, they'll be all right. So yeah, generational curses comes in many forms, and you can kind of see it play out through the patterns of, you know, your family and down the line and how things were. I always said, and it's something that I live by, I don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to be like my mother. I just really don't. If there's anybody that I would love to be with, and she puts a smile on my face, is my grandmother. My grandmother was free with herself. You know, did she kind of go through her aspects of living her double life? Yeah, she did. But at the end of the day, she was always happy. She loved dressing up as a clown. She loved entertaining. She loved dancing. You know, she just really enjoyed her life, you know, and every time I was around her and I seen her, it was just always in this very uplifting, you know, spirit. And that's the type of a grandmother that I want to be towards my grandchildren. I might eliminate a couple things here and there because my grandma was, you know, she was a gangster in the streets. But yeah, I you know, I appreciated her rawness and how she lived, to where my mother, on the other hand, was a very close the door, hush hush of everything that's happening in the house. And when we go out, just make sure that everything looks has a certain aesthetic and looks a certain way. And we show up for church every Sunday, you know, while her children are being abused by the stepdad, you know, and she doesn't do shit about it. So yeah, that's a whole other story, y'all. The rabbit hole goes deep with that type of shit, but I don't want to be like my mother. And I had a conversation with another friend of mine about this about a week or so ago. You know, and if you pay attention to women and their mother relationships, most of them are disconnected. You know, why that is, I don't know. But there is a lot of women, grown women, who have been disconnected from their maternal mothers and who have had some type of friction, you know, with their mothers. And so I don't want to be like her. And there's a lot of things now in my life that, you know, she painted a picture of who I needed to be. And now I'm rebelling against that identity, you know, and that's another reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm rebelling against that identity. You know, things don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to present yourself in one way, but then behind closed doors, you know, it's just a chaotic, you know, situation. And, you know, coming on here, being raw and being real, and this is just how it is what's important, because you're releasing those masks that we constantly wear every single day for everybody else because we're too consumed about what everybody else is going to think. You know, you can't really reach the aspect of being a warrior until you learn to be able to have people against you. And that's just what it's going to be. When you're on the front lines, you have to make sure that you have your shield and that you move forward with as much force and fierce energy as you can in order to be able to untangle yourself through all of this bullshit that we have been carrying from our ancestors. And, you know, I've been given that baton and I've been given that badge of honor to be able to do that. And so, yeah, there's no more sitting around and blaming the past for this current reality, because if anything, if you're using your past as a stepping stone and as a mirror, then there is no hatred in that. There is no hating people from your past. There is no regret from your past, because if you're content with where you are now, all of that was required and needed in order for you to be in this present moment. And that's something that we should all be grateful for, right? Especially if we're living with integrity and we're living in a space of, you know, moving forward with ourselves into our greatest versions of all that we know how to be.